Hey everybody, Xander here from NWR with my friend Matt.
That's me.
And we're going to be talking today about Fire Emblem Three Houses, the Blue Lions house in particular. This is going to be a super casual conversation. We didn't really prep a whole lot for this other than we just kind of been talking about the game back and forth in the DMs, and I finished it about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I had a lot to say to Matt about it, and I figured, you know what, let's share this with the world. And Matt, you've played like this game to death, right?
I just checked. I have 142 hours and 56 minutes on my save file.
Dang. Okay.
I've played 3 of the 4 routes, so.
So I played this game for 80 hours, which is like almost half of that, and actually it's a little bit over half of that. Excuse me. And I've only finished the one path, the Blue Lions. So if this goes well, if we have fun doing this, if people are interested, maybe we'll do one for like each of the paths, assuming I get through all of them, because right now I'm not super interested in going back. I did start over, and I got to like, I don't know, 2 or 3 of the chapters in the first part of the game, and then I kind of fell off. But
it sucks because part 1 is more than half of the playthrough, and it's exactly the same pretty much.
Yeah. So I guess, do I start off with the negative stuff, or do I start off with the positive stuff? What would be the...
I usually like to start off with negatives so that we can leave on a happier note.
Good idea. Okay, so I will say, I think my biggest thing with this game is that I don't think I like the story structure very much, and we talked about that a lot at the Game of the Year discussion with NWR. And I think I have like gone from being like kind of confused by it to not liking it to just being like, this is dumb. Why did they choose this? And because you said you finished 3 of the 4 paths.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have a much better understanding of this. For this discussion, we're gonna try to stick to the Blue Lions path, but because that's what I've played. But I think I'm a little confused on why they have you pick a house and then you follow that story, and then they don't give you all of the answers to these things that they set up, when a lot of those things don't matter for that story. It's a very fractured design. It's like they had this grand story, and then after the halfway point it just goes into the one side of one of the houses that you pick. There's a lot of characters that are introduced and you spend a little bit of time with that you never see again, and are basically kind of written out at the very end. And again, I'm going to go into spoilers here. So like Lady Raya, she disappears after the halfway point, and the whole crux of the second half is like trying to get her back from the Imperial Army in the Empire. And you never see her in the whole playthrough. After the time skip, you don't ever see her again. She just gets a quick mention at the very end of the epilogue saying that she retired and Byleth becomes the new Archbishop, which I was just like, what? Why would you even include her disappearance at all if this is like how you're going to handle this? There's the people, I think you called them those who slither in the dark, which is
the worst name.
Yeah, that's like the worst name ever.
They do have an actual name, but it's only revealed in one of the routes. 2, technically, because it's the one that it's in Verdant Wind and Silver Snow, which are 90% identical.
Oh, cool. All right. So that's like Solon and Kranya, and I think his name is Thalos, maybe? I don't know.
Thalos.
He had a weird... Thalos, okay. Yeah, so Thalos and Solon and Kranya, they are the people who... I kind of categorize them as all of those characters. They all just disappear. They are not talked about at all the rest of the story. And so I presume that is if they're doing this perspective change where I'm seeing the story through Dimitri's house, I'm assuming that because I don't see Edelgard very much, that she's dealing with the people who slither in the dark, those guys. I don't like saying that name. It just makes me uncomfortable, but that's their name. She's dealing with them. And Dimitri talks a lot about his past and his relationship with Edelgard, and like how he can't understand why she's doing the things that she does. So he talks a lot about her, but to be honest, we don't see her a whole lot in the Blue Lion's path until the very end, which is when I was expecting like a bit of resolution. But instead, she cray-cray, I guess. I guess that's the best way of putting it. Like, she just had a plan and stuck with it, and then turned into a scary monster, and then Dimitri takes her out. But, like, yeah, Lady Raya, the whole, like, dragon thing, the Slither in the Dark characters, they all just disappeared, and I thought that was very strange. And so I'm assuming that that she is the one dealing with those characters in her story, and I could be right on that. However, that makes me also think that maybe this isn't a perspective thing. Maybe this is like a different timeline. Like, depending on which house you pick, you literally are just experiencing a different story entirely.
It's sort of a little of both. For the most part, it's the same things, but it's like one of those things where it's like, you know, there's that one thing that's different, and it has a ripple effect.
Right.
So all of the house leaders end up pretty much in the same place. You know, Edelgard's the emperor of the Adrestian Empire, who's waging war against the kingdom. Dimitri's been deposed by Cornelia, and Claude is off just trying to keep the alliance together. But the key difference is based on, you know, which house the professor was with, who controls the monastery.
Okay.
And so that makes a big difference once the things start to get going.
Right.
The 5 years of the time skip are pretty much identical in every route, but then once the professor comes back and joins up with one of them, that's where things start to get very different.
Okay. Yeah, and I was assuming, like, if every route has the monastery as like the home base in the second part, then that just wouldn't add up from a perspective element, which is fine, but I don't think that it was a very good idea to include all of these elements that are attached to different stories in the part 1. Like, Gerald's death was a big moment. I didn't like how it was handled, but it was a moment in Byleth's arc, if you can call it that. And then afterwards, you immediately go to his quarters and you find the diary, and it talks a lot about how Lady Raya supposedly did something to Byleth. And this all takes place in the part 1. And there's a whole scene where you discover Dimitri is in the library and is looking at, like, I guess, donations, and I think one of them was from Lord Arundel, who you meet again later in the story. I just felt like all of these elements were very neat, and they were adding up to a mystery that was never actually resolved in my story. I'm assuming I get those answers in another path. However, I guess, like, I'm not trying to be a stickler for continuity. It's just, it doesn't make any sense from, like, a timeline perspective. Like, why would this exist here if it's an answer to this story? You know what I mean? I think that if they're gonna do this three story structure, I guess it's 4, then they shouldn't have included any elements from other paths, because they're not relevant. They're just kind of eating up space. I don't know. Do you agree with that? Am I kind of off base here?
I largely would agree. Yeah, I think as for why it happened, I think it's really easy to just look at it and say this game was huge in scope. They only had so much budget. They only had so much time. There was only so much game they could make.
Right.
So as for, like, the how this happened, I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But as for, like, the end result, like, you know, let's just forget all that. Just talk about the game as it is. I think that it's probably the biggest problem with the game is, like, everything that you're saying now, because you kind of do need to do all 4 playthroughs to really understand the story, or just, you know, go look it up on the wiki. And once you can see the whole story and know everything that's going on, I think it's a really good story. I think that everything that's going on is really, really cool. But the problem is that the path that you need to take to get to that understanding is just arduous. And, like, on a second playthrough, part 1 can kind of be still interesting because you can try different strategies, but then by the third playthrough, it's just like, oh my god, just get this over with. And then I couldn't even imagine doing a 4th playthrough that quickly.
Right.
And I've had people like say to me, well, oh, you don't play the game so many times in such quick succession. But then there's so much of the story that you never understand.
Yeah, you can't fault the gamer for like playing the game. Like that's how they structured it. That is the intent that they had. And yeah, I agree with you. And maybe this is like a cynical take on it, but even if I play all 4 of these stories and then I can look back and be like, okay, that was a good story, I don't even know if I can say that, because all of these different elements that are answered in other paths, like, they still don't make sense in comparison to the path that I picked. Like, I feel that the Edelgard character who I faced down at the end of the Blue Lions is probably not the same Edelgard from the Black Eagle story, because her motives don't make any sense to me, and they're probably not the exact same. Again, it's not a flip by any means. So whatever was happening in the library, whatever the connection is to Raya, like, none of that is relevant in my story, because nothing is followed through with it. They just kind of brush it off. It doesn't make any sense for you to tell me at the very beginning of the game that Raya is up to something, and she did something to Byleth when Byleth was a baby, but then at the end of the game just say, oh yeah, Raya retired, and Byleth became the new Archbishop. That doesn't make any sense as far as a conclusion. Oh, but the answer will be in a different path. Okay, yeah, sure, but that path doesn't, it's not the same story as the story I'm taking. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that the scope of this was just so big that they bit off a little bit more than they can chew in terms of the actual structure. It sounds like the actual narrative and concepts that they put into it has very neat ideas. It just doesn't land in terms of how it's presented, and I think that's probably the biggest shame, and maybe the biggest barrier that's holding me back from continuing on with this series. But I did like the game a lot. I just think that with the way it was structured, it's very difficult to care, because I don't know what they're telling me and if it's actually going to matter in the next path that I play, and then the path after that, you know? And by the time I get to, say, my 3rd or 4th, like, I told you, I spent 80 hours with the Blue Lions, and I'm sure my next playthroughs will go much quicker, but that's still a lot of information for me to have to remember after playing several variations of this one path, if that makes sense. I was actually going through some of the footage that I recorded for NWR today, just to put up like timestamps, and I saw like there was an interaction where I met Lord Arundel before the time skip. I had completely forgotten about this when I had been playing it. So I felt like when I met Lord Arundel again, that was my first time meeting him. I forgot that like Dimitri had introduced me to him much earlier on in the game. So that's...
Yeah, and it's definitely like the perspective that I had of playing the Crimson Flower route first, where Lord Arundel was more important in that route. That, you know, there are things that I knew from that route that made parts of Azure Moon and Blue Lions make more sense. Like, I knew who Arundel was. I had more context from him. But then there were parts of Azure Moon that would have informed more context for Crimson Flower. Like, the entire relationship that Edelgard and Dimitri had in their past is never mentioned in Crimson Flower.
Wow.
And
so
again,
it might not exist,
with the
you know?
context,
it might not exist.
Well, with the context of every route, I understand it. It makes sense. But in the moment where you're figuring everything out, you know, drip feed through these routes, it's like now, like, you know, a couple months later, now some of the DLC's out. I've started a 4th playthrough, and I'm just playing it through again, and all these little things that like are confusing you now and not really making sense, the puzzle pieces are all fitting together for me. And I'm at this place where everything falls in line and seems perfect. But it took me 146 hours to get to that point. And that's insane.
And I feel like my puzzle piece, like, I was given too many pieces, and then the pieces that fit made the puzzle up. Like, I was given maybe 6 big, giant jigsaw pieces, and they made a picture, but then there's like 48 smaller pieces that just have information on them that don't matter at all. And, oh, you can use that for this puzzle, but it's like, then why did you put it in this box, you know? I think that's actually a great analogy of describing this whole situation, is that you have too many puzzle pieces for a puzzle that doesn't need them. And I think that's just a real shame, because, like, I don't know, maybe Dimitri's relationship with Edelgard in the Crimson Flower story doesn't matter, and maybe that's why it's not included. Like, if she's dealing with her own story and Dimitri's not in it, then yeah, why does Dimitri need to be fighting her at all? Like, it's just such a weird parallel that doesn't really make much sense to me. And the other thing is, I would not have understood the path names had you not said something to me in the chat. This might be a small thing, but I did not pick up on that. I think it's White Moon is the part 1 path name. White Clouds. Okay. Well, Azure Moon is for the Blue Lions. Crimson Flower. We've got Silver Snow, I want to say, and Verdant Wind. Yeah, I would not have picked. Maybe I would have figured that out like way later, but you told me pretty early on that was like their naming for the paths. So yeah, they do have official names, but maybe I'm just dumb. I just didn't figure that one out very quickly. So yeah, I hope that. Go ahead.
It pains me to say, because Fire Emblem Fates, I hate that game so much. I really hate it.
Yeah.
But specifically what we're talking about, splitting content up into multiple routes that you need to play all 3 of them to really understand what's going on. But Fates does it so much better.
Yeah, I played a little bit of Fates, and I agree. I think that the beginning, first off, the part 1 is like 4 or 5 chapters. It was significantly, it's
quick.
Very quick. You can get through it really fast.
It's quick, and on a second playthrough, you can start from the divergence point.
Awesome. That's perfect. And there's nothing that's provided to you beforehand that you would need to see again, which is great. Or there's no alteration. Like, it's not like you're picking that house and getting a little bit of a different character interaction, but it's still the same story. Yeah, I agree with you. That's a much better way of doing the split structure, because, again, it's not like this weird instance where there are these elements that are needed for other stories that don't actually matter. It's just a very weird way to try to wrap your head around understanding it and explaining it to someone. I think that jigsaw puzzle is kind of the best way I could illustrate it for somebody. But yeah, I agree with you. Fire Emblem Fates did it better.
I think everything in 3 houses, they could have fitted into 2 routes. And when I say that, I don't mean that, you can just choose 2 routes right now and get everything, because, like, you can't. To really understand everything, you either need to play all 4 routes or go to the wiki. But the amount of things that need to be conveyed could have been conveyed in just 2 routes, I think. And I wish they had done that.
I think that this is telling me that, like, I'm not interested in playing another Fire Emblem game that does a split up structure like this. If they do Fire Emblem 3 Houses 2 or whatever, then this game made a lot of money. They're already working on the next Fire Emblem game for sure. It'll probably be a ways off since the DLC's not even out yet, but I'm sure it's done at this point. I don't think I'm interested in doing this cacophony of storytelling again, because it was just it was a mess. It kind of was I don't expect a narrative to suddenly be a brain buster in the way it's presented. It seemed just a little bit much for me.
I definitely hope that they don't do the split structure again.
And the other thing I hope that they don't, and if they do return to a split structure, do it like Fates did, make the intro a lot shorter and make the paths actually make sense. Don't have this weird, you're on a path.
Well, I mean, in Fates they don't make sense, but Fates just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, all right. But I'm under the assumption though that Fates doesn't have this cross section. What is that? Your cross elements where you have details in one path that only matter in another path. I'm assuming
it does not. No.
Don't ever do that again. I hope not just Fire Emblem. If any game ever does that, that's a real disappointment. Unless I can figure out a way to make it work, but it's like a lot shorter. But yeah, no.
there's like one chapter in Conquest where like you go to a weird place and it's like, boy, wonder what that was. Anyway, let's get back to the story. But that's it.
Cool. Okay. I mean, yeah, sure. The other thing I hope that Fire Emblem moves away from, and this is less of an issue than the story structure for sure, because we've spent a lot of time talking about that. I think I'm not interested in playing as an avatar anymore. I know that a lot of people really like avatar characters, but I think Fire Emblem Three Houses made me not care about avatar characters. And this has nothing to do with the Smash Brothers controversy from just a few weeks ago. Like, that was cool to see Byleth get represented and also Fire Emblem get a stage. But Matt, you and I talked we would do it a little bit differently. We'd have him be like a Pokemon trainer type character with the 3 different house leaders. But anyway, that's...
I don't think it would ever work, but I would do it. I would want that
too. That's really ambitious, but man, that would have been cool. But yeah, my point is, I don't think I really cared about Byleth, even though I felt like Byleth had no personality, but everything personality-wise was given to me in this, like, it was almost like Link in a way, where everything is told to me and I don't ever actually see it. Like, Byleth didn't cry when Byleth was born. Byleth didn't cry. Geralt says that Byleth cried when he died, but I didn't see any tears. I just saw this like blank face. It's yeah.
Byleth is I wrote a whole article on NWR about how Byleth is probably the worst of the avatars in the series. They have done 4, technically 5, but Mark doesn't count. They've done 4 avatars across the series, and Robin is by far the best. Corrin had potential, but Fates is just generally a poorly written game. Chris, get out of here. But Chris at least was like inconsequential enough that they were created for a remake, and you can literally remove them from the story because they weren't in the original. But like Byleth, you can't have 3 houses without Byleth. But also Byleth's kind of bad.
That's what I was saying. Like, I think I would rather have played one of the 3 houses leaders. Like, I would rather have played as Dimitri, Edelgard, or Claude. But at the same time, Byleth is like really important to the story, even though Byleth is like not interesting. It's kind of like, I don't know, you have to have the taco shell, even though the shell by itself is really boring. You can't just have all the ingredients, you know? Which is it's a bit of a shame. I hope that, again, if they return to an avatar character, make it a little more interesting. I kind of like how they would hide avatar characters. Like, Robin had that hood on, and Corrin had like the dragon mask thing going on. But then they switched it to, I guess, just having male or female.
It just don't let you customize.
Yeah, there's no, like, what's the point of an avatar character if you can't even customize it? You can only just choose the gender. Like that. Don't get me wrong, I like seeing the character I'm playing as in the really well done animated cutscenes. At the same time, I would be fine with them just not being in it at all and seeing it from the other characters. But yeah, I think I've said my piece on that for sure. But anyway, enough about the negatives. I liked this game a lot. I got addicted to it. And if you had told me... I think I started playing this late November, early December is when I started talking to you about it. I would not have expected to have been so invested in a Fire Emblem game, because after I played Awakening and then Fates, I thought I was kind of out. I really enjoyed Awakening, and then I played Fates, and I thought it was just kind of... In my mind, I was thinking it was more of the same, and then I didn't really go anywhere with it. I kind of got bored with it, so I dropped it. And I wasn't expecting to ever pick up 3 houses. I kind of, I don't know, turned a blind eye to the trailers. I was kind of like, okay, yeah, that's Nintendo's July game or June, whatever it was, last summer. And then I picked it up kind of spontaneously. I was kind of itching to just do something new that wasn't something I'd been playing over and over. And yeah, I ended up really liking it. I was kind of addicted to the little school setting that they had going on, you know, running around, meeting people. I will say after part 1, that wore off really fast, and I think it's because there's less to do in part 2. There's way less characters, and then everything else is kind of just already there. So yeah, it was really fun. I didn't expect myself to get so invested in this game, even though I know you are a. Can I call you a connoisseur of anime? Is that an appropriate title to give you?
More or less, I guess. I don't watch that much anime, but I watch more than the average person in America does.
You are calling it an Anime World Report, aren't you not?
I mean, that's a little bit more of a joke, but yeah.
All right. I think that there were some things that I noticed that maybe aren't Fire Emblem issues specifically, but might just be an anime thing that I couldn't really get behind. And they were all really small nitpicks. I hate to go back to negatives, but I thought it was odd that like they showed a young Dimitri and Edelgard, and they have to be like 5 or 6, but they're being voiced by adults trying to sound like kids. I thought that was really silly.
Oh, well, that's just a matter of, like, child actors are not worth it.
Yeah, I figured. It was just like, okay, it probably just didn't want a child actor. Yeah, lots of small things, like, I would have been fine with them not having the, like, almost, I think it was like 300 support conversations that are possible to have in the game. I know a lot of people probably really like those because they build up a lot of character, and some of them are amazing. I was genuinely shocked at how much I liked Sylvain after having some of his support conversations. But some of them kind of...
There are...
Go ahead.
It's astonishing how many support conversations they made for this game.
Yeah,
like,
a lot.
Like, back in the day, you would have... you would have support conversations that were about as good as the ones in Three Houses, which I think they're pretty good. But you'd have like 3 or 4 for each character because, you know, you got a cast of like 30 people. How could you have these in-depth conversations between every single one of them? And then for Awakening, they were like, have everyone support everyone. But the conversations were really short and not as good, and a lot of them were more generic. And then Three Houses just goes, okay, what if we go all in on all of them? Every single character can talk to every other character, and like there are some cross houses supports even.
Yeah.
And they're going to be just as good as the old ones were, and they're going to be fully voice acted too.
Yeah. It was ambitious, and I kudos to them for pulling that off, because again, like I said, I was shocked at how well I liked some of the characters after having listened to their support conversations. Like Sylvain, I think was probably my favorite Blue Lion student. I thought that his narrative with, I think it was Mercedes that he talked to, where you learned a little bit more about his past. I thought was very interesting and kind of subverted my expectations and what I thought was going to be kind of a stereotypical womanizer. But then there's like Eloise, who is afraid of ghosts, and Mercedes likes telling ghost stories, and it was like pulling teeth trying to get through those. And I was just like, why did the effort go into these and not the structure of the story? It's just kind of a silly thing. But yeah, I would be okay with them pulling back on those a little bit. But if people really like those, you know, then, I mean, maybe I'm in the minority there. I just kind of would rather have one thing over the other. But yeah, I really liked how the characters were presented and written. I thought it was kind of silly that there were like boss fights that only, like, it'd be introduced to the boss and they would have their own character art and they would have their own name, and I was like, should I care about this person? But then they'd be dead by like the end of the hour in that one battle.
That's pretty typical Fire Emblem. Every boss usually is like a named character with unique art, and then they're
I remember that from Fire Emblem Awakening and being like, I feel like I'm being introduced to characters and then they're just dying right away because I'm killing them. Like, should I be missing something? Am I missing something? But no, that's just it's a Fire Emblem thing, which is all right. Yeah, I really enjoyed the tactics. I think that was probably my biggest like enjoyment from the game, was just really getting in and trying my best to play, I guess, the way that it was presented. I'll admit I'm not the most intense, so I played on I forget the exact name of it. Is it Phoenix? That's like the casual mode.
Well, yeah, it's just called casual.
Yeah, I played in casual mode and easy. I was just like, I haven't played a Fire Emblem game in a while. I'm gonna treat this like I'm a baby, and I enjoyed it for that. And I set up some really good restrictions for myself. The Divine Pulse thing, where you can go back in time, that was really neat, and almost made it too easy. I had to really like tell myself to like not worry about that so much, because I felt that it was almost being used as like a clutch for literally every move. So when I kind of realized like how I was playing, I pulled back on that pretty hard. But yeah, by and large, I really liked the tactic stuff. I liked the part 1 of the monastery stuff. I enjoyed some of the support conversations, but kind of wish that would be pulled back. But by and large, I'm shocked at how much I enjoyed Fire Emblem Three Houses. It was really good. I really liked the Blue Lions. Yeah.
So the Azure Moon, I think, is the best individual route in the game. It's not my personal favorite, just because like Edelgard is my favorite character in the game. So it's like, obviously I'm gonna love her route the most. But I think just like looking at it objectively, like the story of Dimitri overcoming like the literal ghosts of his past that are haunting him, and like dealing with grief and coming to sort of rebuild his life. It's one of the better character stories in the series, I think. Maybe not one of the most fleshed out because of how sort of minimalist the cutscenes can end up being, but it's just like it's a raw character drama that speaks to me in a more personal way than most of the series does. And also his voice acting from Chris Hackney nails it. One of the best voice acting performances I've ever heard.
Yeah, I don't listen to, I guess I shouldn't say I don't listen, but I guess a lot of Nintendo games I play don't have voice acting, and so it was very nice to not only hear voice acting, but also a really fun performance. Like, he definitely gave it his all, and yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I do think that sometimes it tended to do, again, a lot more showing, or not showing, it did a lot more telling than showing. Like, there's a lot of things that would happen, and then the screen would just kind of cut to black, and then you'd see some like sword marks and stuff. So that was always like, well, you could have just showed me that. You don't have to like imply something. It's not like I'm playing make-believe, but it's like, I don't know. I can't be a beggar. It's what's that thing called? Beggars can't be choosers.
Beggars can't be choosers.
I can't really do that with this game, but it's whatever. It's fine.
There's definitely a certain amount of, what I mentioned earlier, only so much budget, only so much time.
I do kind of get like just when I see that kind of stuff, it makes me feel like the game was rushed, and it might have been. I think you had mentioned something about that when we were talking, but I don't know. It's at the same time.
It might have been. I don't have any proof for it. It just, a lot of things, they line up weird.
Yeah, the way they had, it was delayed once, and the amount of stuff that seems to be put into the game, you'd think that, like, I don't know if polish is the right word, but, like, some finalities to certain things would be there, but not quite. And it's like, I sound like I'm being really negative on this. I loved the game. It was my runner-up to Game of the Year. It's very fun, even though I was expecting to not be really hooked by the anime side of it. I was really only there for the tactics. I ended up really enjoying myself. You kind of have to suspend some belief for sure. I was like, the first part of the game is, you're a mercenary and then you're a teacher, and that's really silly. And then you kind of spend some time being a school teacher and like la-di-da, and then things get really weird at that halfway point, and then from there on, you're kind of buckled into whatever story you picked. But I really liked Dimitri's story. It wasn't like the most groundbreaking thing I'd ever seen, but it was like, as far as a showcase of a character, I thought it was really well done, and I really liked all of the Blue Lions by and large. Speaking of the tactics in particular,
this game has like some of the best additions in the series. Obviously, I think the turn wheel does a great job of like sort of bridging the gap that I see between like casual and classic. I don't really like casual mode because you can just kind of throw units at a wall until just a war of attrition. They need to beat you they need to beat every single one of your guys, and you only need to beat one of their guys to win. So I've always liked Classic more, but the Divine Pulse allows you to play on Classic without it being super punishing, which makes it more accessible to people, which I think is good. And I also love the gambits that they added. Those are brand new to the series, and they're another layer of options that you have for dealing with enemies. And they have wide area of effects that they can hit. Some of them have different status effects. They stun enemies so that they're good for crowd control. I really hope that the gambits just become a series staple now, because they add a lot to the tactical choices that you can make, and I think they're the best gameplay thing that the game added.
Yeah, I think gambits are really cool. They were not in Fire Emblem Awakening at all, but I really enjoyed being able to try those out and see how they would work. I liked the idea that you could like knock back an enemy or break their shield. Sometimes I would spend some time just trying to wear down a demon beast or like some kind of flyer and break down all 4 of their shields. That way you could get like the I think it's called the Umbral Steel item, which was really good for forging. Yeah, that was really fun. But I agree with you. I hope that also returns, because that just added like this new level of gameplay to it. There were like these different systems or shapes on the grid that could it was like an area of effect with those battalions. But yeah, definitely make a comeback. Yeah, overall, like the tactics here was really fun. I know some people were kind of upset that the weapons triangle was gone. I don't really miss it, to be honest with you. I don't know. What do you think?
I kind of would prefer the weapon triangle be back, because I feel like the game's a little too open-ended in what you are allowed to do. And it kind of just makes every unit feel the same in some way. And I'm not as much a fan of that. I like the weapon triangle more overall, because I like if the game just says you can't use this unit against this enemy. I prefer that, because that makes me consider my strategies more. And as it is now, it's just like, well, using this person or this person, it doesn't really matter. It's all the same. So I like the weapon triangle.
Okay. I guess I haven't played enough Fire Emblem to say definitively, but I don't know. It felt like it was less restrictive, which I appreciated. But at the same time, if you're someone who's like been with this series for a while and you like that that restriction in what you can do, maybe that's something that is missed for sure.
I feel to some extent you should have restrictions in a strategy game, because then it's not really much of a strategy game if you can just do anything and it'll work.
Right. Yeah. It's less about which soldier, I guess, which unit, that's the word I'm looking at for, which unit you've picked and where you put them on the board, and instead it's more of like any unit, which is a bit of a bummer. So I understand that.
This problem also extends to how like every character can be every class, because you after a couple playthroughs you start to realize that there's one class that's particularly better than the others, and I'll choose not to share that with you, because once you know, it's like, well, why am I bothering with any other class?
And I think there are new classes being introduced in the DLC. You know what? I mean, I'm planning on playing that at some point. It looked neat. It looked like it was a lot shorter, which is appreciated. So we'll have to do another discussion on that, because that'll be fun.
I am a little disappointed how it looks like the DLC it's just going to be a side story that takes place during any of the routes. Because my perspective on this, and this is a problem that I have with all the DLC so far, is I've already played the game 3 times. So, like, when one of the first free updates, it adds a new character to Crimson Flower. That was the first route I played. And for me to get this new stuff, I have to replay that route specifically.
Yeah. Oh, that does bite. Yeah.
So,
Also, I think you can recruit the characters from this DLC side story, but if you've played the game already, like, what's the point? You know? Yeah, that I agree with you. Weirdly, though, if it takes place in all 3 of the timelines, then I guess it's the most content with being what it is. It makes the most sense. Like, the continuity is there, which is silly.
I'm glad that it's not like a secret 5th route that, you know, is actually the true ending and wraps up everything. Because I actually didn't like that about Fates. I didn't like that Fates had like one true route.
Was that the third Revelations? Yeah. Okay, wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, when a game has a structure like this, I don't like where one of them is the correct route, the canon route. I like that it, you know, for all the problems that the structure of this game has, I like that every route is equally valid as what really happened.
And I get it's kind of ambitious to tell a story that has three or four sides to it, where depending on which side you pick, you are experiencing the same story from a different perspective. That's not what they did here. You know, they definitely started with that, but then it kind of just goes off the rails, which, you know, I don't want to say it's fine, but like, it's not the end of the world. Like, I still really enjoyed the game. It's just not something I hope returns by any means.
Yeah, I feel like this game, you know, it's like I said earlier, I don't think the real world circumstances necessarily excuse the problems, but it's very clear, you know, how it ended up the way that it is, and I think that they wanted to make a much bigger game than they were able to do. And I appreciate that ambition. I appreciate that they were trying something very big. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out the way that they hoped. They had to scale down on their plans, and it ended up a little half-baked in ways. But it was also really great at a lot of other things. And I overall think that this, I mean, I championed it as our game of the year for NWR, and I stand by that. I think
it's our game of the year and our biggest disappointment, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, simultaneously.
Which is, yeah, if you haven't checked out the NWR game of the year,
it's something.
It's something, yeah. That's a good way of putting it. I was kind of scratching my head at the end of that conversation, but you know what? That's a different conversation than what we're having now. Before we go, I want to ask you, who is your favorite Blue Lion student?
That is tough.
I think Donald's is Dedue.
Dedue's pretty good. I think I would... So the easy choice is Dimitri because he's the focus.
Sure.
But I'm going to purposefully not choose Dimitri because, you know, he's the main character of it.
Yeah, let's not pick the house leader. Let's talk about the students that are in the class.
I'm going to say Felix is probably my favorite.
Interesting.
Because while we admittedly don't see a lot of, like his reaction to his father's death, it is, like, what we do see informs a lot about his character and how, like, yes, he's lost a lot as a consequence of war. He lost his brother and now he lost his father, but he contrasts Dimitri, where Dimitri fell into despair because of his grief. Felix, his resolve was strengthened by his grief. His the tragedy that happened in his life inspired him to be stronger, which it makes him a great contrast to Dimitri and makes him, I think, a pretty nuanced character. You know, when you first meet him, he's just kind of this hothead who he just doesn't like Dimitri, and he just thinks he's better than him. But over time, you start to realize that he's more complex than that. He's a very strongly written character, and I think his arc is the most compelling outside of Dimitri's in the Blue Lions Kids.
I would. That's a really interesting take. The idea of him being like Dimitri's foil is that's very true. You know, I do kind of think that, like, it's neat how many characters there are. I never felt like I spent enough time with each of them, despite how many dang supports there are, because each support is so different. But there's only like 3 or 4 conversations you can have about one thing with each of them, and it kind of was structured like the first one is they're not getting along, the second one is they're warming up, and then they open up after that in succession. But yeah, Felix is definitely a neat character. It was always fun to see him open up about, I guess he didn't really open up a whole lot, but he would kind of jab at Dimitri, especially whenever something really heavy happened. He'd what was it? I think it's the fight in Ramir Village where you're fighting these like zombie villagers that are like under Solan's spell, and Dimitri has a moment of weakness and he kind of goes insane for a little second, and then Felix is the first one to call him out. He calls him the Boar Prince, and it was just kind of like this ongoing connection that I really appreciated. I told you in the DMs my favorite was Sylvain because I was just so impressed with how my expectations were subverted. It was like this, you're introduced to him as like this womanizer, and I was kind of like eye rolling, like, okay, we're just gonna play stereotypes now. But then I think it was, go ahead.
It's funny, he's the only character in the game where you can instantly recruit if you're playing as female Byleth.
Yes, I got footage of that because when I switched to playing the Black Eagles, one of the first things I did was I went to go recruit Sylvain. But I don't think I'm going to keep him in my party because I spent so much time with him in Blue Lions, and I liked him a lot, but I don't want him to taint my experience with the Black Eagles. So I only did that for footage purposes, but yes, it's really amazing that they included that. But yeah, you learn that Sylvain isn't really into women. He is kind of using it as a vessel of revenge in a sense, because he finds that he knows he's very attractive, but people really only like him because he has a crest, and he thinks it's disgusting that women only want to be with him to have his crest baby, to like buy into the royalty that he has. He feels like he has no actual value, and that it's like this kind of ultimate version of objectification that he views of himself, and what an interesting take on a character who's a womanizer. Like, he's kind of like this revenge-filled character where he's getting his up on all the people who he thinks are wronging him.
Yeah, and a lot of people dislike him specifically for that reason, but like I think a lot of people have trouble recognizing the difference between a bad person and a bad character.
Yeah,
and I would say I think Sylvain is a bad person, but he's a very strong character.
I would agree with that. I really liked how he seems like one of the nicest people on the in the class, and I always felt like I had a good relationship with him. But also, I was playing as male Byleth, so I would almost be interested in just seeing the female Byleth perspective. Now, I doubt they actually wrote it that differently because Byleth is so one note, but it would have been kind of neat if like Sylvain's story would be a little bit different depending on which gender of Byleth you play as. But yeah, I would agree that I think that yes, Sylvain's kind of a bad dude, but I really liked him for that. I think that it was neat to see a reason behind this character other than, oh yeah, I'm just a bad guy, because in a way it's like that makes him more bad than some of the other villains that you meet on the battlefield, because this character has a little bit more depth to it. It's quick, but because it's only in the support conversations, but you just realize like, wow, like there's like that you could take this concept and kind of run with it somewhere. So yeah, don't hate Sylvain just because he's a bad dude. Hate him because he's a bad dude, you know. I like Sylvain. Sylvain, he ended up with Felix in my epilogue, and I thought that was very sweet.
I really like that epilogue. It's cute.
Yeah, I was kind of like, I did not cry at all in this game, but like I was weirdly moved when I read the epilogue for Sylvain and Felix. It was very like one of the kindest bromances I've ever seen, and I don't know, maybe like the epilogue gave both of those characters who have their own darker sides to them a bit of redemption in the end, at least how they treated each other. So
yeah, the epilogues have always been one of my favorite things in Fire Emblem. Like just these little short paragraphs of just like how this character lived their life after the end of the story. And Three Houses, I think, is the best. It's the best at the epilogues of paired endings that we've had in a while. Because in the older games, paired endings were rare. They would be for like, you know, a couple characters, not even like a quarter of the cast would get them. And then in Awakening, it was like, oh, everyone that gets married gets a paired epilogue, but all of them have like a part 1 and part 2, and we just mix and match them. And Three Houses actually has unique, fully written epilogues for every pair, and that's really cool.
That's such an interesting thing that thing that Fire Emblem Three Houses does is that it took the time to cater to all of these relationships, be it in the supports and the epilogues and the pairings. Like, that's a lot of work to write for each of these characters. You know, you do that exponential math. It's a lot. And it's crazy to me that the work went into that more than I suspect went into the actual narrative of the story.
Well, I think at the end of the day, you can knock those epilogues out a lot quicker than the entire structural story.
Right, exactly. And I think that's probably why you see so much of that quantity there, is because the focus was more on building those relationships and how they connect. So, yeah, Fire Emblem Three Houses, I give it a thumbs up. I'm going to keep playing it here off and on if I can get back to it. You know, college semester is pretty busy, but I would like to get through the Black Eagles, because that's I feel like that's the other really big one that everyone has played, and I feel like maybe that one parallels the Blue Lions pretty well. So
yes,
I'm hoping that I should get a little bit more answers than what I would get from the other paths by playing through the Crimson Rose path.
I definitely believe that Crimson Flower and Azure Moon, if you can only play 2 routes, those are the ones that are worth playing. Okay. And it's weird to say that, because neither of those routes are the one that goes into what's actually up with those who slither in the dark. So, but I think they're the best ones overall.
I hope it's like, I hope I fight another scary version of one of the house leaders. Like, I want to see, was it called Hegemon Edelgard? I want to see that. I want to see that version of all the other house leaders. Like, I want to see a Hegemon Dimitri and a Hegemon Claude.
It's fun. I've seen fan art of a Hegemon Flame. It's really funny.
She kind of has the... Alright, she's kind of halfway there with her, like, cute design. I mean, just got to add some darker colors. And
it's also funny, the card game, Fire Emblem Cypher, which I hope to have a video feature about pretty soon. Okay. There is an Edelgard card of a dancer Edelgard, and she is called the Hegemon of the Dance.
Wow. Oh no. I appreciate talking to you about this. You know, I think this is a kind of a good test run on the Fire Emblem Three Houses discussion. If you were interested in anything we said, or if you have some different opinions, or you just want to share with the discussion, you know, drop a comment down below. I'll personally try to reply to as many as I can. I really like communicating with people who watch our videos. But Matt, I guess, where can people find you?
So I'm on Twitter at Grimace Duminis. It's Grimace, the McDonald's character, DU, and then Menace, you know, like Dennis the Menace, but I wanted it to rhyme with Grimace.
That's pretty good. That's a fun explanation.
I usually go by Grimace the Menace, but it doesn't fit in Twitter, so Duminis worked out, I guess. I also do a podcast with my friend Joe DeVader for NWR. We call it Smashterpieces, where we are playing one video game for every character in the roster of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which we just added Fire Emblem Three Houses to.
I was about to say, does that mean you've just added Fire Emblem Three Houses again?
Yes.
So will that be your opportunity to play a path that you haven't played? Are you saving Verdant Wind for that?
Well, Verdant Wind I have played. It's Silver Snow that I haven't played.
Oh, Silver Snow. Okay, got it.
And we don't know what we're gonna do yet, because that's a tough question. We figure we'll decide that later. I think it would be cool if we got 2 guests together and each of us played a different route. But that would be weird to do a podcast format.
Well, if you do that and you need someone to talk about like the DLC, I'll play through that for you. I'll happily volunteer for the shortest one.
Smashterpieces is actually specifically why I was hoping Cindered Shadows would be a separate full route. So I could just be like, oh, let's just play Cindered Shadows. Makes sense.
That was the only hope you had for another 80-hour adventure, was just for the Smashterpieces episode.
But we just recorded our episode on Star Fox 64. We are going in release order.
So it's gonna be a minute before we get to Three Houses then.
I actually did some math based on howlongtobeat.com and roughly how long we do the streams every week. And we've got a few years left in this show.
Hey, that's all right. That's fun.
I believe this math was done before Byleth, and does not account for Byleth or any of the other unannounced DLC characters. But when I did the math, the show was projected to end roughly around New Year's at the end of 2025.
Oh, great. And so by that point, we will probably, I'd say we'd be like maybe a few years away from the next Smash game. So
yeah, roughly.
Yeah, you know,
if it's not already announced by then.
Yeah, I would imagine we probably won't have a new Smash game by that point, but I would think we're probably getting like, all right, it's that time. Who's the next fighter? You know, like that's kind of the conversation. So, and it'll probably be another Fire Emblem character. So, you know, your work will probably be stacking at that point, which will be that's fun.
We'll have a built-in season 2.
Yeah, that's good. You know, longevity, it's good. So if it's the same cast again, will you do the whole thing all over, but just a different game?
I mean, ideally. Yeah, there are some characters that, like, what else are we gonna do? Like, you know, for Ness, I mean, what could we possibly play but Earthbound? Yeah, but hey, Final Fantasy VII Remake will be out by then. Part 1.
True. Yeah, you'll have that. I guess for like Ness, I mean, you'd have to. I guess you could play the Earthbound Origins game, but like when it comes to Mother 3, I don't know. That's a
and there are some that are already fudging. Like for Rob, we're playing the Subspace Emissary.
Oh, you're not playing Gyromite?
How are we gonna play Gyromite?
I don't know. I'm sure there's an emulation. I mean, yeah. Well. Thank you so much for talking to me about Blue Lions. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and that was really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I thank you for, you know, playing the game and having a good time. It is not my favorite Fire Emblem. That's still the combination of Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, because they're a continuous story, so I consider them one experience. Sure. But like Three Houses, it's up there.
Okay, I want to finish Three Houses. I think I've put so much time into it, and I'm invested in where it's going. I care about it enough to see what the misshapen final picture is, because I know after having talked with you, like, it ain't going to be a pretty clean cut, like, okay, that all makes sense, but also what? It's probably just going to be, okay, I know all the details, so it's like, it's asking me to create my own headcanon in a sense, because all of how scattered all the details are. And I think it's like, I don't like that, but because I've enjoyed this game so much, I want to see it through. I want to see what that looks like. And I think that like there are probably some other WTF moments that won't make any sense that I want to experience. You know, I was very shocked with when Edelgard showed up at the very end with her new outfit, if you want to put it that way. I loved Apex of the World. You know, I want to see what other content is being put behind these other paths, even if it requires me to, you know, play through the part 1 again and then kind of hold off for a while.
Yeah, and Crimson Flower, if that's the one that you're going to play next, it unfortunately was hit with the shortest end of the budget stick. I can't lie about that, but Edelgard's just, I love her as a character so much. So,
do you think that we're going to get a follow-up to this world? Do you think we're ever going to see these characters again?
I don't know if we can, given the nature of the game.
Right, that's what I'm thinking. Like, you'd have to get 4 follow-ups, if I'm correct in saying that, and that would be, they did that to themselves. But
most of the games in the series don't really have a follow-up, so it's largely an anthology series. Yeah, it's rare for a game to get a sequel.
Yeah, I think that the Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn are the exceptions there. Which, after, you know, Ike has always been one of my favorite characters from Smash Brothers. I've always thought he just looked amazing. Like, you know, it's terrible to just judge somebody based on what they look like, but like, I've never played either of those games, and I loved playing as him in Smash. I liked reading about his trophy description in the other games he was in. So I've been itching to get to Ike because, well, I haven't been. It wasn't until I played Three Houses where I was like, okay, I guess I could get back into Fire Emblem. And now, after having talked to you, like, yeah, I would definitely want to play the Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn games. But man, they're hard to find at a cheap price.
Oh yeah, because they Path of Radiance was modestly successful. Radiant Dawn flopped, unfortunately.
That's a tragedy.
So it is. They did not print many copies.
Well, you gotta wonder if, like, would you say Fire Emblem is a more successful series than Xenoblade?
It's tough to say.
Yeah, you gotta wonder, like, because I don't want to get into another huge conversation here, but they did create that, like, Echoes rebranding. You have to wonder if they're gonna continue that and bring
I really hope, because there's still. We're probably never getting Mystery of the Emblem in America because they already remade that in Japan.
That's the one on the DS, right?
Yes, that was Marth's second game. Unfortunately, we're probably never getting that one because they already remade it, or at least we're not getting it anytime soon.
If they remake Fire Emblem, the one that is called Fire Emblem in America, but is not actually just called Fire Emblem in Japan. I think it's the one with Lyn.
Yeah, its proper subtitle is Blazing Blade, and nowadays Nintendo has started actually calling it Blazing Blade. So
okay, good. If they do an Echoes of that, I would appreciate if they called it Echoes Blazing Blade, because I really can't stand it when any piece of media just uses the name of the series. Ghostbusters did that, and I'm just okay, whatever. Fine,
I think what's probably more likely is a remake of Binding Blade, which Blazing Blade is a prequel of. Binding Blade is Roy's game, and that was the last game before the series started getting localized. And also, Binding Blade is not terribly good and needs a remake.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of room for this series to continue, and I think that even with Fates having come out, I want to say, was that 2016?
In America, yeah.
In America, okay.
It was 2015 in Japan.
So that's about 4 years, but in between there, we got an Echoes game. You have to wonder if we're going to get another Echoes in between now and whatever the Three Houses follow-up will be.
There's also the weird question of Koei Tecmo did most of the legwork for developing this game. If you look at the credits,
right,
which we did this for our Know Your Developers of Intelligent Systems. You can go check that out too here on YouTube. Yep. There's not, like, very few staff members that worked on this game were from Intelligent Systems. So, and, like, Intelligent Systems is very, like, they're very segmented. Like, the Paper Mario people work on Paper Mario, the WarioWare people work on WarioWare, and the Fire Emblem people work on Fire Emblem. So what are those Fire Emblem people doing?
Did the Fire Emblem folks, did they make the Echoes of Shadow of Valentia?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe they're doing that. I really don't want to get my hopes up, but, like, maybe that's what they've been up to. Maybe
I don't know.
Oh, that would be cool.
Maybe they're working on Tear Ring Saga.
Oh man, can you imagine we get, like, a direct here in a week, and we get a Paper Mario and another Fire Emblem game, both from Intelligent Systems?
God, I really want to know what they're doing.
I don't think they're gonna announce. Do you think they would announce something at the same time as their DLC coming out? That seems a little silly.
Probably not. Maybe an Echoes game.
Yeah.
But probably not otherwise.
All right. Well, that's been the Fire Emblem discussion. If you're down and I can get through another path, well, I think we could do another one of these just to talk a little bit more about the Crimson Rose. And goodness knows, I know you said you kind of wanted to replay some of them. Maybe we could get this going for every time we get through a Fire Emblem game. We could talk a little bit about it. I don't know if people would be interested in that, but yeah.
I would love to, especially if we're talking about Crimson Flower, because I could talk forever about Edelgard. Oh,
cool. All right. I'm excited to hear that, because I know you've definitely voiced your passion in the DMs. So
I hope I haven't overhyped her, but, like...
Oh, no, no, it's okay. It's difficult for me to get overhyped now. A lot of stuff's been overhyped for me, and I can kind of gauge where things are now. So, yeah, I'm excited. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in, and have a good one.
Yeah.
This video was made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Did you know that Nintendo World Report is funded directly by fans like you? When you support Nintendo World Report on Patreon, you get immediate access to multiple exclusive podcasts every month, exclusive Discord channels, an early look at select content, and more, all for as little as $1 a month. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.